change your mind, change your habits, change your life.
Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Unplugged with Taylor, where we discuss 5D concepts to help you thrive in a 3D world. Today we're here with Jessica Sharpenstein, my friend, my spiritual mentor. She's a musician, she's an educator, she's an intuitive, she's a space holder, and just a bright light of a human. So thank you for being here, friend.
Thank you, Taylor. It's an honor to be here today. I appreciate it.
I'm really calling in my most laid back, go with the flow, chill interview to date. I feel like, it's often been very clinical. Mm-hmm. So I'm excited, because you and I are so comfortable together to really just flow with the conversation and see where it goes.
Yeah. I have chills right now. I feel a lot of heart energy and opening. So I'm really excited about this connection and whatever comes through us.
Yeah.
I
love what you said about we grounded in, and you're imagine roots going down to the earth, because I do that all the time. And I made a reel on Instagram about how I had to walk 5 blocks from my downtown apartment to be able to put my feet on grass and ground in. And of course somebody commented and was like, you're still on a slab of concrete. I'm like, a motherfucker always got something to say. I'm just trying to spread the word about grounding.
That's right.
Nothing is ever good enough for people on the internet.
I'm just feeling called to respond to the energy of negativity and the whatever it's maybe confirming for you that, somebody's disbelieving and what people think. We often get that. But I feel as I get more sensitive, as I've gotten more sensitive, I can hear the vibration of the negativity a little more. So it's a reminder to send compassion, right? That's the lens in which they look through. That feels like othering. That's not where it's coming from. But I've been that person before.
Yeah.
Right.
And that gives you a level of empathy for being in that place, because I've been negative and angry.
Yes.
I've been in that space.
Yes.
And it's interesting how you just put it, because people, we see the world through the lens in which we're operating.
Yes.
So when you're not at matching frequencies,
yes,
someone is only seeing you for all of your limitations because that's their current lens.
Yes.
Versus someone who's operating at a different frequency and has done their work are going to see the light instead.
Yeah, I almost think about, again, I always try to not be a hierarchy of, where they are, and it's I have to be careful around the languaging. I think for me, because all of this, I'm a skeptic. I was a skeptic. I was always a skeptic. So spirituality is a no. It's nonsense. It can't be proven. And so I would just look for evidence, confirmation bias that these things don't exist. I can't be, magical was the word that was just coming out of my mouth. So when you would have, say, rooted, which I'm down for, I would have not been down for. That would have been hippie nonsense to me because of my story around spirituality or believing in things. So that maybe comes up.
Because you're a science nerd like me.
Yes.
You're a very analytical science nerd. I love the way that it reminds me of me, because I will just casually in a conversation with someone be like the other day when you were like, have you heard of polyvagal theory? And we're just casually having a conversation. That's some shit I do.
Yes.
And so I just love another person that loves the why, a truth seeker, someone who wants to see the connectivity between science and spirit and medicine and, religious concepts, where it all kind of meets in the middle and says the same thing.
I think I used to beat myself up for that because, again, my story, I look at patterning, right? Patterning's my thing. And so then I've shifted that. Polyvagal, we were talking about the polyvagal theory in education, right? Mm-hmm. And let's be clear, I went back on our document and put some peer-reviewed research for us to look at on education and polyvagal theory in the classroom. But as we were talking about it, the science is a construct. It's a language. So we talk about multiliteracies, right? That's something I talk about. So all of these are different languages in which I'm saying almost the same thing, right? Believe in ourselves, find our story, whether it's through spirituality, whether it's through physicality. I look at patterning and how we exist, and so that's helped me bring it together. We've talked about how we've felt unprofessional or not going to be taken seriously because we believe in things that don't exist or aren't tangible. Right, or in the 3D world. So I've had to let that go, and that was really attached to people pleasing, caring what other people think.
Yes,
and that was a block of my channel and the way in which I can serve.
Oh my gosh, there was someone gave me some advice to, like, my heart are these conversations and putting them out on Spotify and YouTube, and I use TikTok and Instagram to bring traffic to my YouTube channel. And someone gave me the advice, you need to make a Facebook and just automatically share your Instagram stuff to Facebook so it's already there. You know, it's just one more platform. Well, as soon as you make a Facebook, there's everybody from your hometown, everybody from old coworkers, your grandma, like that's who's all on Facebook. And so it kind of took me a minute to let go of this sort of feeling of, I'm talking about these concepts that some people find pretty out there or whatever, but that's just a story that I told myself also. Actually, I got a couple interesting text messages after I made a Facebook from people I used to work with that I would have never thought. I got a message from somebody I used to work with that said, "Welcome to the 5D." And I was like, what?
Oh, yes.
You never know.
I thought it was just me.
But it's like this, when you start showing up authentically and letting go of that, letting go of stories of judgment or whatever, you're going to draw in, you might lose some people, but you're going to actually draw in people where there's resonance.
Yes.
And that comes with that. I'm so happy you put this term in my life, vulnerability hangover.
Yes.
Because I'm experiencing, every time I really kind of open up, I have this like feeling the next day of like, should I delete that? Am I just like, do I look like a baby just whining about things? Am I just wallowing in my trauma? Like, I have to really work through that.
Yeah, I mentioned yesterday Dr. Brene Brown. That's where that shame researcher, and that's the vulnerability hangover. And she tells the story. She made a big TED Talk, I believe, and it went viral, but talks about her vulnerability hangover. But what she said, right, I think about the impact she made by just telling her truth. We've talked about being an entrepreneur. We're entrepreneurs, artists. The vulnerability is where the fruit is. That's where the gold is, and that's the process, and that's the shedding. But it's freaking
it's hard.
We call it bad bitch life, right? Hashtag bad bitch life, because somebody has to go first. I think about this container. We talk about in theater and comedic theater, it's the yes and, the yes and, the yes and. We've used it in the classroom, but it creates a container where we can make risks. And so I guess also I would like to say, in our sisterhood, it's beautiful to have someone walking alongside being vulnerable so then we can continue to show up and be vulnerable, because I know you're holding my hand. I know you're holding my hand. I know you're cheering me on. I know my other colleagues, fempreneurs, are cheering me on to be vulnerable, to speak our truth. So
it's like
thank
permission.
You.
Yeah,
totally. And
absolutely.
like when you were talking, it's like I'm feeling cringy.
Yeah.
And it happens when the most beautiful things, I think, come through us.
Absolutely. And I try to remember, again, everybody like takes stuff in through their own current lens.
Yep.
So if they have a shadow of, I don't like being vulnerable because it makes me very uncomfortable.
Yep.
Hello, that was me, 3 years ago, 5 years ago, especially. It's seeing someone else be vulnerable in certain ways. Like, I used to have a thing, people singing, not like at a damn concert, but like being somewhere and somebody just kind of burst out in playful song. That made me uncomfortable. And I'm like, I felt cringy about it.
Yeah.
And when I really looked at that, I was like, they're just so comfortable in their own skin. And like to sing is very vulnerable.
I think number one, vulnerable. But maybe it's up there.
It's art is vulnerable.
Yes.
Music is a form of art. And
Yes.
so it would make me uncomfortable because of my own, shadows, my own issues with that. Same thing if you're watching a movie and you get secondhand embarrassment really hard for a character on the show.
Yes.
Like I've had times where I'm like, I need to take a break from this show because I'm so like uncomfortable with the dynamic on there.
Yes.
And that's an opportunity to really look at your own stuff.
Yes.
Like, why is this making me so uncomfortable?
Yes, I think all of that, like, it can bring up envy. It can bring up parts of me that, like, envy, right? I wish I could be authentic, or the
Yes.
wanting. And we talk about scarcity. If we're in envy, that means that we don't believe there's a path for us. So it brings up all of those things. I think they're always, I think about the metaphor of like going through the silk and going through the threads, and you pull out the silk and discard the rest. And that's what we're doing, and always sifting through those stories to find the gold. But ways in which people are vulnerable in the art. But the secondhand embarrassment, is that what you called it? I've never heard of that. My friends came to see me. I reconnected with some friends from high school. Actually, some of them, I've known them most of my life, but they came to see me in a show. And one of my friends talked about is that he's like, I was embarrassed for you, or, it was, or my other friend is an entrepreneur too, so she has to post online. But he talked about that secondhand embarrassment. But
and
it's interesting.
It's a personal projection too.
Yes.
Like, it's a feeling of, because that person may have let go of those kind of limiting beliefs and fear of being seen and fear of vulnerability, and you're just projecting your own stuff onto them, really.
I always go back to the 4 agreements.
That's my take nothing personal.
That's what I was getting ready to say, right? It's that. A story I'm thinking about, a student of mine. I was going through these journals to bring through, but on the cover, we shared an art journal together. On the cover, it said, if you want to live a creative life, you have to let go of the fear of being wrong. And I looked at it this morning. I was like, that was profound, and how she brought that through. But we would always talk about, I gifted her the 4 agreements, because we take everything so personally, wherever we are.
When I read that book, that section, because it just, really spoke to me, because I'm constantly creating a negative story around everything that happens, that, other people's projections onto me. Every time it was a story about me.
Yep.
And so reading that, I was like, God, I want to remember this. And I just love the Arabic language. I think it's beautiful. And I was like, I'm going to get it tattooed on my arm.
Yeah.
So literally, that's from the 4 agreements. Take nothing personal.
Yeah. And I think that brings up forgiveness, too. Is it cool if we go this direction?
Yeah.
Because we've met because we're working on patterning, and how that shows up in our lives in all facets: spirituality, physicality. Take nothing personally. Whereas forgiveness, yes. So any, trespasses against us, that wasn't personal at all.
Yeah,
it feels personal, but it really wants. And so when we think about the work we're doing as far as patterning, understand the self-development, forgiveness comes in. And so then we can forgive ourselves and the others, because we just happen to be there.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's our story of whatever we made about it. It's the story. It's the narrative. It's the fiction, probably.
It's interesting to me when I actually speak up about getting my feelings hurt, and I made a story up in my head about something. The times where I've actually had the nerve, and this is a very new experience for me, to, instead of just cutting somebody out or being passive aggressive to somebody, being like, hey, this made me feel this way. I'm amazed at how off I was with the story. They're like, what? That's what you created in your head?
Yeah.
And to me, it's also a shadow, and you, again, brought this kind of way of lens of looking at it. It's not enoughness.
Yep.
So if I've got this subconscious thing back there still in me, of not enoughness, I'm going to internalize and create a story around otherwise just innocuous events that is just more proof that I'm not enough. I did something wrong. This is happening to me because I deserve this, and this wouldn't happen. They wouldn't treat another person this way.
The punishment, all the things that you're talking about, to me, it's that stuff that lives in our generational patterning, survival, whatever it is. And it looks systemically, it keeps growing and growing and growing. But it's those things that are locked in us, and we can rewrite those things. I was thinking about The Body Keeps the Score,
that's
the book, right?
Yeah.
And then the theater piece of it, to be able to then reinvent the story, to come through on that, to reinvent the story I'm lost. I don't know where I was going.
From a place of
Where we going?
empowerment.
Yes,
that
totally.
happens to me.
I was like, where was I going? Yes.
Ellen's that happens to me at least once an episode.
Yeah.
And it's because
There's
I
so
feel like
much.
I'm looking at myself in some ways because the excitement.
Yes.
It's when you get so excited about something that you're like, your thoughts get ahead of you.
Yes.
And you're like, wait a minute.
Yes.
Where was I going with this?
Where was I going? I was going about 10 different directions.
It's a new story
Yes.
from a place of empowerment.
Yes. We were talking about not taking things personally. I don't
Yeah.
know. But yeah, the theater and the retraining the story and the redoing the story. And I was going to acknowledge your vulnerability, your bravery, your courage and vulnerability to say how you actually felt.
Yeah, it's rough.
Ghosting.
I feel my whole.
Did you say cut people out and ghosting?
I feel my whole chest tighten up every time. I'm like, oh God, I'm just going to say it. I don't care. And then I tell myself the worst case scenario response.
Yep.
And then I'm like, okay, how am I going to deal with that? Which is not necessarily where I want to be.
Yeah.
But before I told you, and we had a good conversation about this. Pretty much my whole life, from as far back as I can remember. I mean, high school. As soon as I picked up on, because, I'm always tracking patterns for safety, for emotional safety.
Yep.
And as soon as I picked up on a shift in the pattern of communication from a person that I was like romantically involved with, alarm, nervous system, full, activated, but not, didn't feel safe enough to be vulnerable to articulate a need or like communicate. So I would just be like, hey, you know what? I'm really not into this. Like, I'm out. I'm done. And I've done that countless amounts of times. I mean, to the point where, like, my friends in my early 20s, my friends that I went to college and high school with, they'd be like, oh, did you do it again?
Yeah.
And it's like, every time, it's like, I'm not going to do it this time.
Yeah.
And as soon as that threat would come in, that perceived threat where I created these stories of this person's going to, it was perceived fear of abandonment.
Yep.
I was like, you know what? I don't really, I'm not into this. Like, let me distance myself from it.
I had no tools. I'm just going to put that out there. I had no tool. Maybe I had some tools. I should say no, right?
No, there were tools. They were
right.
just not well-functioning ones, maybe.
Yeah, they were great. And then I think the people-pleasing and then the not saying how I feel, I didn't even know. I didn't have the language for them. The emotional literacy, I think that's something I believe, I don't know. In my experience, it's becoming more salient now to have emotional literacy. I didn't have that as much. I don't feel like generationally emotions were perhaps, we didn't talk about anything.
Yeah.
I came from, my family, they were in the silent generation. So that's just, again, that patterning that comes up. So there was not a safety somewhere to say what you need or even a knowing how to. So we talk about emotional literacy, and those are things we acquire. But to say what you mean, to not ghost, to cut people out, I would do that. But it depends. There was different cases.
It's so nuanced. Attachment stuff is freaking nuanced.
I'm still learning. I'm a novice. I'm not, there's always more to learn, but I've been looking through that lens of attachment. It's fascinating.
Yeah.
Of course, science got me there. Like I was looking at ADHD and then how does that relate? But it's a revelation when we do say things, when we can name things. There's a freedom in it. And then the knowing, like, cool. You know what? We don't see eye to eye, then how can we or don't we? Or cool, you've taught me something.
That's where I'm at right now is like I will get triggered and then I'll struggle with, okay, is this somebody actually like doing, like disrespecting me and doing something wrong, quote unquote, or is this just my attachment wounds, like my fear of abandonment coming up and sabotaging me and making me think there's a problem when really, if I were to say something, the person's like, oh, well, I was just at the gym. Sorry to
Traffic jam.
Meanwhile, I'm over here trying to regulate my nervous system. But you know what's interesting is I've kind of been trying to reach this place of in the right partnership for me, there will be this space of like personal accountability to do my work and regulate myself.
Yes.
But safety to say, hey, that really like brings a lot up for me. Can we talk about that? So it doesn't have to always be like me bullying myself. Like this is just your abandonment wounds. Suck it up. The right partnership for me is not the right partnership for someone else. And I have to accept that I'm not just going to be, in my opinion, if you have some deep rooted core like fears around abandonment, they don't just like go away. Like you're always in recovery and working to like regulate through those triggers. And I think, romantic relationships especially are it's the most triggering thing we can be in because it's mimicking that pattern of parents or caregivers when those initial wounds were created.
I have found that it extends beyond romantic. It extends in all of my relationships. Maybe it's a work relationship. Maybe it's my relationship with an institution, perhaps. Whatever the story is, romantic for sure. That has been my story. But then I took it. I took a step back and my patterning shows up everywhere. It's not limited to romantic. It shows up in my friendships. It shows up in even how I show up into work because of my, say, codependency or perfectionism. And I will make myself so available and exploit myself and do that sacrifice love. And so it's there too.
Overworking, it's there too. Constantly asking people like, I can do that, volunteering for everything.
Yes.
Yeah,
That's true. Gold star, all of that kind of stuff. But I was going to say, I taught mindfulness. That was something was a tool I picked up out of need. Yeah. Because mindfulness is free. I was kind of down and out, and I was like, well, I've read the literature. I'm going to try this meditation stuff.
I was like,
I have done, I've done my research. But to me, what has helped me about the mindfulness, it was one, tool that I could use. It allowed me to take a step back and not react and think about why am I thinking this? Why am I feeling this? Of course, it's not perfect, right? I'm reactionary. I'm a human being and say things candidly. But that has helped give me some space to then look at it and it's not Taylor that's who's triggering me. It is my story about being abandoned, about being trapped, about being taken advantage of. And so to step back and look at that, I think about we're all students and teachers. I would try to, when I'm in this space of neutrality. Thank you, Taylor. Thank you for showing that to me.
Thank you
that
for
need to be looked
bringing
at.
it to the surface.
Yes.
Because you could do all the work in the world on your own and feel good about it.
Right.
But then as soon as you bring a new, and like you said, friendship, work partnership, collegial partnership, romantic partnership into your life, boom, there's all the triggers right there.
Yep.
But it's just have I developed enough tools to use them? Well, now I'm being gifted the opportunity to actually put those tools to use.
Yes, for sure. And I know we've talked about dating and things like that. And I've been looking at Tantra and then the belief of that everybody's our beloved. Everyone is there to how we start. When we think about romantic things, we start taking things off the table. They're not young enough. They're not tall enough. They're not this and that enough. And how we start taking those things away. And we tend to do that mostly with romantic relationships. But thinking about, we're all students and teachers. We're all walking one another home. We're all here to help each other heal and grow. So it's helped me, again, to have that, they're showing me a wound that needs some looking at. And for me, I'm looking at improving relationships, and something I think about, it's my heart is safe with you, or your heart is safe with mine. Let's expand together. Whatever that relationship looks like. Maybe we're creating, maybe we're making a podcast, maybe we're writing a proposal, maybe we're going to dinner. So that has, again, helped me look at it. I'm always looking and thinking too much, I've been accused of. But that's helped me, again, step back and put some space in between it and be a scientist and be objective and just look at what's going on, which is a principle of mindfulness too. It's not personal. It's objective.
When I was talking to you about somebody that I met, which by the time this podcast comes out, I'll have probably told him that I hate him, so it's fine. You won't hear it. But I was telling you about it, and I know you are extremely intuitive, and you you were oh yeah, I see his energy, there it is, and you said all these things, and I was wow. So I know you but you also have shared with me you're mindful of what you say to people. Like you see a lot, but you're
Yes.
like, I'm not going to just,
Right.
I'm going to think about what I say. And
Yes.
so it was interesting to me because you were like, yeah, just be a behavior analyst. And I was like, that feels like not a good sign that you said that. But okay, I'll do that. Like, that means he's about to.
That's actually
ruin
that's
my
your
life.
story. You're telling yourself that you're doing it wrong or that you want to know the answers. It's funny. I remember that text exchange. And I always, again, I'm like watching, who am I right now? Who am I with this person? Am I being like, I think maybe I would say, I wish everybody thought too much. But like, who am I being right now?
Yes.
Where am I feeling this exchange in my body? Am I avoiding something? Who does this person remind me of? Like, I'm such an empath. So the behavior analyst thing. So somebody was like, do you always do that? I do. I'm watching for a pattern. I need some safety because I don't want to do that again, whatever mistake that was.
Do you think that there's a place where it's like too much of that? Because
Yes.
but I knew, the thing is, I knew. Like when I meet people a lot, and typically I'm like, don't feel really, I'm struggling to like open up my heart to people as they come into my life.
Yeah.
I don't want to use the word struggling. I'm working on
Learning.
looking at that,
You're
as you
learning.
said.
That's right. We're looking at that.
And so I meet this person and I'm like, oh, there it is. It's a familiar energy. And to me, in my current lens, the energy feels intoxicating. It feels exciting. It feels like, oh, this is it. This is safety. But then what's my idea of that? What is my idea of safety? What is my idea of intoxication?
That's right.
Is it they'll be the sweetest, most like doting person initially. So there's no signs of like these fear of intimacy.
Yeah.
But then when it comes every time, I'm like, what the fuck? Am I just picking up subconsciously on the fear of intimacy that's there? And I'm like, ooh, there's my pattern again. All the butterflies and all the energy and all the feelings, like, that's hard.
There's so much gold in what you were talking about. Like, number one, I think about the energy of attraction. I work on that because we talked about what attraction conditioned us, how we're conditioned to think about attraction. But, a version of myself, another version of myself, a younger version of myself, I loved excitement and uncertainty, and if there was a chance I could lose my life, that's so exciting. I'm into it. So like,
it's love.
That was attraction. It was exciting. It was new. Like, so like, I kept thinking of like, well, what's a different way of looking at exciting? Like I joke, I'm like, I would love if you're well read.
Yeah.
That's really exciting. So that, and then the emotional addiction that like, that flight or fight, like then the clearing of it and that cycle, that's addictive.
You think it feels like excitement.
Yeah.
And we associate, we're like, oh, this person, I feel excited about this person.
Yeah.
And your excitement is an energy.
Yes.
And it looks really similar to anxiety.
Yeah.
So it's basically that's basically the same energy.
Well, it is the same energy. If we look at that, it's at the reverse U hypothesis, but like it's not that sweet spot. But when we're anxious, we were anxious this morning, but this is really exciting and fun and showing up. But conflating what excitement may mean, I think is interesting too. I'll stop right there.
Well, they say look for stability and not the dopamine highs or whatever. But then it's like, well, I'm bored. And then it's like, well, am I, messed up for this? Or it's an interesting thing because when you logically start to understand it better, that doesn't necessarily, for me so far, change the somatic excitement that feels like a drug.
Right.
I had a therapist tell me one time, she was like, well, this was years ago, but she was like, well, Taylor, if you spend your whole life on a tilt-a-whirl and you get off and you stand on the solid ground, you're going to be like, I don't like this. I want to get back on the tilt-a-whirl.
Yeah, it's not exciting. And then what is our relationship with
it doesn't even feel
bored?
normal.
Right.
It doesn't feel like home.
That's right.
Home, safety, love. If you associate those things with intensity, with highs and lows, with a fear, that's going to feel like home and safety and love to you.
Yeah, I think about acceptance. When we're talking about all this recovery and stuff like that, where we are in acceptance almost feels boring. It's like, whoa, this is it?
Yeah.
This is actually what I wanted. I wanted stability. I wanted consistency, right? Because I think what we're talking about here is also that we're excited by inconsistency. Because then we don't know. Then we're breadcrumbed. And then do we get it? It's like a video game. And then we get it. It's a drug.
Yeah, literally. Like cocaine.
That's right. That's right. And then that come down and then you go chasing it and you chase it and then it's not good. That's totally breadcrumbing.
Yeah.
Right? And then the letdown and then the shame that you feel for being breadcrumbs, right?
Yes.
But it is interesting what consistency and stability feels like in the body. It's foreign. It's learning a new language somatically in your body. It feels unsafe to feel safe. We think about our trauma response. For me sometimes, or, silence is triggering for some people.
Yeah.
I don't like, you've been there. I live like a pioneer. I don't like a lot of noise. I'm so sensitive to it. But that noise and that distraction is also triggering for me. Whereas for other people, the silence is like something bad's going to happen.
Yeah.
Because for me, like, if I heard some footsteps, well, you know what's going to happen. Sorry.
You're talking to somebody who's scared of the dark, gets up in the middle of the night, checks the locks. Like, I'm just 100%. The ice maker drops, and I'm like,
Because what happens when we let our guard down?
Yeah.
Bad things happen. So the consistency feels unsafe, foreign, a new language to learn. For me, it's like, safety is okay.
Yeah, wow. And how is your brain associating the energy of safety if it's not really experienced it before? Because it's like, well, what is this? Do I like it? I don't even know what it is.
Call in a friend sometimes.
It feels fake. It's feeling not.
Am I being gaslit?
Yeah.
I had a conversation with a friend last night. I feel like I'm being gaslit. And our stories, I feel like I'm being gaslit. Taylor, are you gaslighting me right now, having me on your show? What do you want from me or whatever?
Like everything is supposed to be this transactional exchange. So it's like, why are you it seems stability and, unconditional love, all those things feel like you're missing something.
Foreign. I did some writing about this in this crazy storm. It's crazy. Like, I'm up there writing about it, but the transactional thing is conditioned, right?
Yeah.
And I'm learning, how to love myself unconditionally. I believe we're always doing that, I would think, in some ways. I don't think we get there. I don't think there's a destination. That's something I've had to learn. I don't get there. It's always a thing to learn to love yourself unconditionally.
And I've been kind of looking at it like we're, like, in our natural state of who we really are, our soul, we are unconditional love. So we're unlearning, but the thing about peeling back conditioning is when you go back into the world that we live in, here comes back more conditioning.
Yeah.
And so you have to keep peeling back.
Yeah. It's, I mentioned to you, I think before we started rolling, I'm really sensitive right now. Whatever I'm really sensitive in general. But so I'm being out in the world, like at a meeting, I'm here today. So it's interesting to then celebrate if you hear some conditioning or that what you're not tripping over again. I trip over the same thing over and over again, but I didn't trip over that same thing. I saw it and I walked around it and then I gave it compassion and thanked it.
That's so important to look at, because if you don't look, because then we've talked a lot about like our own struggles with perfectionism.
Yep.
So if we don't look at the progress and acknowledge it, we're going to be like, well, I made another mistake. Yep. I'm not doing this right. I'm failing at healing.
I might as well be a fill in the blank or whatever the story is. The perfectionism. I work, I pull cards and just those things just stop for a second. Celebrate how far you've come. How far you've come. I think we could all hear that.
Yeah.
In the intangibles, like I didn't blow up or I felt comfortable or I did it scared, right? We talked about fear. I did it scared, but I did it anyways and I did it. To stop and pause and think for that. I've struggled with making decisions. I've been gaslit a lot. So I can't. And then what if it's not perfect? And what if I make a mistake? And so it's hard to sometimes walk down the stairs.
To get in a freeze. I get it. I get like that with like the project that you and I are working on, with this podcast stuff.
Yes.
Things that I love doing and light my heart up.
Yes.
I will like find myself procrastinating.
Yeah.
And when I look at it, it's this fear of making a mistake.
Mm-hmm. I will refine I don't share. I won't share. I don't share. So I hide it. That's my perfectionism too. I just recently, in the past 3 years, returned to the piano again, which was a big wound for me. And it's a big metaphor for so much. But the piano, I was like, I'm going to do this. And so that's been the most challenging for me. It represents so much healing. But to play in front of people freaks me out. And I have set dates to play in front of people. I've played in front of audience, but like that's so naked for me. And it's like that is where you can really burn me. And we still do it anyways. But like to pause and just do it sometimes. Just do it. Like you're posting your content, you're being vulnerable. And we have to do it, which is a slogan, right? But
yes.
Doing it scared. And I think again, bringing in community that I'm doing this scared.
And remembering that being afraid means you're like on the right track.
Yes.
Like if you're afraid, that's a sign that you're moving in the right direction.
I've go to acupuncture and that was my thing is fear. It just really drove the car for me. It really drove the car for me. And it's a liar. But I feel it in my body. There's been a fear cycle I've been working through, but I used to think, well, if I get here, if I get this degree, if I get that, it'll all be done.
Yeah.
Not true.
Same with happiness. Like yes. I've been really thinking about that too with my platforms. Like everything is measured, like success.
Yes.
We measure success by like quantifiable.
Yes.
What's your following? Like
yes.
how much money are you making off of this?
Yes.
How many views did you get? How many likes did you get?
Yes.
So like this letting go of that as a measure of success so that I'm not so tethered to that and more like process oriented and just doing it.
Yes.
Like that's kind of like a fear of being ignored.
Sure. I think about, again, the structures in which we live, patriarchy, capitalism, and that really is a quantitative way of measuring things. I was actually into quantitative research. And I believe there's a place for it, but why is that the measuring stick? We think about what is the measuring stick? It's like, are my roots showing? We talk about that's the measuring stick. So youth and beauty, is that the measuring stick? And what is that? How are we defining that quantitatively? Is it likes? Is it X, Y, and Z? If we're talking education, is it grades? So we have to extend we're on the same teaching page, I believe.
Yes.
We're process oriented. And how do we create that? How do we give that to ourselves, say what we would give to our students?
And sometimes something represents, like you said, it's not just about, because some people might think about it like, oh, I really don't feel that comfortable playing the piano in public, so why am I going to go do something I'm not comfortable with?
Yeah.
But really, it's a metaphor for fear. It's a metaphor for vulnerability. It's a metaphor for something so much deeper than playing a gig on the piano.
Amen.
And that's what, like, when I post things, like, or when I went and did the float tank.
Yes.
That surrender represented so much more to me than laying back in the float tank. It represented letting go, putting myself out there with content. That represents like being my authentic self and being vulnerable. So it's so much deeper than just the idea of like... it's so much deeper than what it seems. It's so much deeper than the surface.
I was thinking, you were talking about, the playing the gig. I restarted writing again, but years ago I was working on blogging, and I was writing about vulnerability, and I was like, what scares me the most? It was getting back on stage again. So I went and auditioned for something. Auditions are the worst for some people. Like,
sounds so stressful.
It's like, it's performative. Yeah. It's performative.
And you're like, I picture there's like 4 people. Simon Cowell is one of them. You're up there alone. And then you put out vulnerable art, that came from your soul. And they're like, nah.
Yeah, that's not it. Next. Okay. But I went and auditioned. I was like, there's some gold here. And so I could write about the vulnerability. I went and did it anyways. And actually, I got a part. But I did it for the growth. I need to say that to myself right now. I'm doing it for the growth. We're doing it for the growth. But there is so much more. Even in theater, it's not about the play. It's about the process. It's about what we went through. If you go through an art or an educator, right? It's not about the grade. It's not about semester 1, trimester 1. It's about, oh my gosh, I saw Lonnie read a page for the first time. I saw,
I saw a spark of confidence in a kid that school in its traditional model has robbed them of.
Yes. And I think we're doing that, and then we have to extend it to ourselves, right? And to remember that what helps me is to think there are others seeing this growth. And I have a community, I'm getting more of a community that are like, I see you out there. I see you facing your fears.
And it's freeing.
Yes.
So, and sometimes it's something so small. Like you and I have talked so much about beauty standards and like my struggle and your struggle, like with perfectionism in that realm. And a few weeks ago, a friend of mine had a party, and I was kind of trying to do my hair, and it wasn't cooperating. And I was like, I'm just going to wear my hair in a ponytail. And something so small like that was
Yes.
a really big deal for me.
Yes.
To go to a dressed up party
Yep.
and just put my hair back in a ponytail.
Yes.
But it's like these little wins that give me permission to let go a little bit.
Yep.
Like, you don't have to be, perfectly put together all the time. You can just be.
For sure. Be. Yeah, mine would show up with the working out. I've told you a million times. I was talking about it out there. I was in the fitness industry. I was a dancer. I love the physical thing, but it can always everything gets turned around through our lens, through our pattern, through our filters. But taking a year off, 2 years off of exercising the way that I would walk. And so a story I would tell myself is, I'm just walking. Well, that's dope.
Yeah.
You're walking? Yeah. Cool. I would tell America to do that. Go take a walk. But it wasn't good enough for me because I wasn't, 15% body fat. I let it go.
Yeah.
All the space that shit takes up in your mind to then think about all the books we could have written and all that stuff.
Worrying about counting
calculating
calories
whatever,
and calculating
macronutrients.
Macros and...
But I'll do it. Go for it.
Yeah.
Right? And we talked about how safe that made us feel. That's a great tool. Your ponytail or your not ponytail, you're that works for you from being criticized or humiliated or whatever happens when your hair's not fixed.
Yes. Whatever that story is, whatever that represents.
Young, right? For me, it was young. Being a young artist, I felt... that's where you get it. I was validated and on stage. And so that was the message I received, that you look good, you perform, you smile. It was so,
You get love.
yeah. And also, I'm so grateful. I got to be on stage as a child. Amazing. It ruined me as far as like, this is fun. What I need to do for a living needs to be fun and bring it joy.
Yes. What a beautiful message that we should all get as young people, because like so often it's get a job security and practicality. And here you are 9, like, what,
I wish I could. I wish I could, right?
Yeah.
But there's a trust in that flow. To see, I've spoken about my father as a musician, and like, he did what he loved. He did what he loved. So to see that model, and then to do it inside, you have a family, like that's amazing. So the messaging I got is really cool, but I understand the say warning, like it's like uncertain. They don't want that, right? It helps everybody feel safe if everything is certain.
I love what you said about like the association of validation with like a way to get love.
Yep.
I have like really went back and been like a archaeologist of my past with where all this like obsession, because a lot of times I think when I've met people and just had surface level conversations with them, and then at some point people have shared with me that they found me initially very shallow. They assumed I was very shallow. I just am putting out an image of being shallow, and that's so true that's so far from my true nature that I'm like, okay, but where does this obsession with appearance come from? And I remember, like, as a kid, my mom projected all of her, like, physical insecurities. My dad is also that way onto me. My mom's dad also bullied her, like, her whole life about her weight, all the things. So, that was really a big part of my messaging. And in middle school, I was going through this awkward phase. I was, like, bullied, very low self-esteem. Like, I remember not even couldn't even make eye contact with people. So then I go to high school, and I'm in this, I go to a different high school than everyone I went to middle school with. And I remember a little bit into high school, 9th grade, walking down the hallway to go to the bathroom. And there's this senior guy, he's the hottest guy in school, and he's walking down the hall. And he goes, "Hey, Taylor." And I couldn't even like respond because I was like, how does he know what my name is? And I was like, that was weird. And then I met this friend, and we went to a basketball game together. And she was like, I thought she was just the prettiest girl I'd ever seen. And these guys we went to school with were like, you guys look like sisters. And I was like, wait a minute. And then it was like, am I cute? Like, so then that became my story, that being pretty, being cute, being appreciated for that quality equated to receiving love that I really desperately wanted. And that carried with me, and I'm fighting it now at 36, you know? So it's interesting where that starts and how it became this thing of me seeming like I'm shallow because I care so much about that. But deep down, to me, I created a story that this is the only way to be loved.
I think it's insidious. It's in our system, right? I would get mad like a little girl. Why was I raised this way or whatever? But like, I think what did we see on TV? What about the aerobics? I saw diet pills in the house, you know, and like that's what they did. And I think about the Twiggy, the model, you know, we've talked about that too. Just the cultural norms.
The 90s especially were big on like
fat-free, whatever.
That was like very much promoted a very thin version of women. And that, so growing up, like that was not my body style.
Right.
And so I really struggled with that early.
I think about, say, from a maternal nurturing standpoint, they're protecting us. I feel like that's how I'm choosing to look at it. They're thinking like this is what society thinks of, say, whatever.
You're talking about parts.
Yeah.
Are trying to protect you from.
Yeah. Or my mom was trying to protect me from criticism or whatever, right? I don't know. Yeah. That's how I kind of look at it.
I think a lot of parents don't want their kid to be bullied, so they encourage them to fit in, whatever that means.
Yeah. I think about... I'm back on Brene Brown again, and I can't remember which book it is, but I might be butchering the story, but a child walked down that had dressed themselves and looked a mess, quotation marks, right? And so I think the mother said, oh, you clearly dressed yourself today. Or maybe this is my story. I don't know. But like, so, you know, the child was so proud, like to express, and the parent was thinking, oh my gosh, they're going to get bullied. They're going to get made fun of. And then, you know, that message got perhaps twisted, how it was received, like, oh, I'm not pleasing, or I'm not X, Y, and Z. So I had to look at it a different way of like, keep going. What are we seeing? What are we holding up? What are we valuing? What's the measuring stick? And then it becomes not personal anymore, right? It is personal, but it's not. And the cultural norms, right? If certain, you know, we're not fill in the blank enough, so it can be not enoughness that it comes through. But to look at where that validation comes from, mine, you know, might have been good grades or how well I can play the piano. But, you know, is it a story I'm telling myself? It's a story that was given. I think we're so in such a soup of conditioning that's how it starts.
And it's hard for me, like plant medicine has really helped me see that it is conditioning. And even though it comes back when the medicine wears off, at least I can be like, oh, that's what that is, versus like completely getting carried away and consumed by it, because we live in a culture that profits greatly off women's insecurities and wants us to be insecure. You won't even know something's wrong with you, and it'll be suddenly like, oh, this line right here is a problem,
right? Because
they're selling you a way to fix it.
Yep.
Like,
yeah, we talk about patriarchal beauty standards. Like that is it. I keep stepping away from it. And I've told you I worked in the fitness industry. It's an industry. And it's something, you know, we're selling supplements. I've taken supplements. I can actually. I've you know, it's cool to be able to shift your body and things like that. But why are you doing it?
Yeah.
But why are you doing it?
What's the intent?
Yeah. Plant medicine's interesting how it's shaking and it's shifting different ways of being and looking at, wow, that's made up. Where did that come from?
Who told you that?
Who told you that? Going back to scarcity again, I was listening to some information. I have to listen to it over and over again, right? We're so embedded in it. But someone a long, long time ago decided there's not enough. And we're going to base all of our structures on that.
And how much money is being made off the idea that none of us are enough?
A lot.
And we're never doing enough.
Yes.
And we're never being enough.
Right.
And so here's money that you can spend to try to get better.
Yeah, that's right.
And that's where that intent comes from is, am I going and getting hair extensions because I don't feel enough without them?
Yep.
Or do I just like the way they look?
Yep.
Because when you're operating from that place of scarcity or not enoughness,
Yep.
it's never going to be enough.
Never enough.
I've talked to you about this And I haven't really opened up about it a lot, but I think that it's a common experience and that I'm called to talk more about it in the future. I had a really bad plastic surgery addiction in my 20s that, like, when I would get in my head that there was a flaw, I would fixate and obsess on the flaw until I could figure out a way to get my finances, resources in order so I could fix it.
Yep.
I mean, there were times where I had to talk myself out of a nose job, or a full facelift in my 20s, like just anything. Whatever extreme, I'd gained 5 pounds and suddenly I needed liposuction. Like, I just had this feeling of it is never acceptable to not be as close to perfect as you can be. It's not acceptable. You are not allowed to have flaws.
Yeah.
And it was like a drug. Like, it was bad.
It is a drug because then I would exercise, say too much or whatever, fill in the blank with whatever. Maybe it's I drink 10 cups of coffee a day to not feel X, Y, and Z, whatever it is. But it is, that not enoughness, fill in the blank. But it is a drug because it soothes temporarily. We talked about...
But it's never enough.
It's never enough. The myths of not enoughness. The myth of not enoughness. We talked a bit about Gabor Mate yesterday. Incredible work about that not enoughness and the scarcity and where does it come from. And we all do things that we know that aren't good for us and we do it anyway. And like, why are we doing it?
Yeah.
And to know why we're doing it, right? I used to work a lot with, say, emotional eating or eating patterning. Eat the fucking pizza. Go. Eat a bag of chips.
Just notice when it's noticed.
And it's not that easy, right? Because then the shame might come in or I lost control and I have not enoughness. But to be able to watch the narrative, I think, is opening the door.
I agree. I had a person tell me that. She was like, when you are eating to avoid emotions, maybe just try noticing it.
Yep.
And not shaming yourself, but being like, oh, why am I eating this?
Yeah.
It's an emotional thing.
It's a powerful thing. It's a mindful thing to notice. One, I'm dissociating. I go the other way. I would not eat or count
that's
something.
Control.
It's control. It feels so good.
It feels good to
so
control
good.
Not eating because you're controlling something about your appearance, and that's an illusion of control over circumstance. Yeah.
Being unacceptable, whatever. To control that is so satisfying, so serving. Control, right? We can talk about that forever, too.
The illusion.
Yeah. I wish it weren't.
Yeah, me too. It'd be awesome.
It's like, I'm a sorceress, right? In certain ways. But that how things, I think, are maybe your eye for detail. Let's call it an eye for detail. To watch you, what you were looking at in this podcast to start, I was like, I would have never noticed that. That's an eye for detail. That's a superpower. But sometimes they can hold us back, right? So the perfectionism and the drive, I'm going to get what I want. I think you have that too, or go for it. But it's like, why are we doing it?
It can be a gift, but it can also, I can miss the beautiful moments.
Yes.
Like, oh, this was really good about this, but I'm fixated on a mistake or a flaw. So I can miss the good.
Yep.
Always looking for mistakes because I still struggle with this is nothing. Me being like, Ellen, how's my jawline in this? And how's my hair look? That's nothing.
Because I'm like, Ellen, don't tell me. Just shoot.
There was a time where I couldn't hardly look at pictures because it would just bring up. And I think there's so many more women like that than we realize because it's how many women are like, oh, don't take my picture, or oh, let me look at, oh, that's terrible. Oh, don't show it to me.
Yeah.
Some beautiful women.
Yes.
And it's like, wow, what has happened to us?
It's interesting, do energy work or people who've worked on me and the assumption that like people who have it together, like we live, that we're happier, whatever, the grass is greener. That's another pattern too. The grass is greener if I have, my eyelashes are longer. Mm-hmm. The grass is greener. But that we still are, in our human condition, we still struggle. Like, we've talked about my food thing. I was like, cool, get up at 4 a.m. and like compromise your sleep to go look a certain way. Also, it's cool, though. Sometimes it's cool to feel a certain way about it. But we all are having something that we're looking at, working on. And then I think you get women in the room. And I'm not even going to keep, it's not just women. It's men, too. Maybe their hair's falling out and they don't want to look at it or whatever, fill in the blank. But it's disheartening that, or maybe it's not disheartening. If we talk about it, if we're candid about it, then we're not alone.
Yeah, that's the power. I'm glad you said that. That's the power in being honest and speaking up about a really difficult thing to be vulnerable about our insecurities, right? And in a world that gives us more and more insecurities, which feeds consumerism.
Yes.
And I think it's the where is it coming from? Because I would never. Sometimes I feel a vibe from people, sometimes women, but of like, oh well, I don't care about stuff like that, or I prefer like lighter makeup, or I prefer to, and I'm like, good for you, bitch.
That's right.
Ass. Like I take offense to it, but I don't think it always comes from that place. But I think that like it goes back to intention. Yeah. So if I'm operating from a place of lack, and I think that hair extensions are going to make me feel whole, I should know at this point in my life that they aren't, because I have went through the pattern of like, well, when I get my teeth done, or when I get this laser treatment, or when I get, then I'll feel good. Right now it's my eyebrows. I'm waiting on them to get them redone. Now it's right now. I'm going to feel good when I had to draw them on today. I'm going to feel good when I get my eyebrows done. And it's like, well, Taylor, for about 20 years, none of the times that you were like, oh, well, when this happens, has it been enough? Yeah. So it's never going to be enough. Yeah. It's the same thing with when you're chasing anything, money from a place of lack, relationships from a place of lack, success, social media stuff. Like, I remember when I was so excited to have like 100 followers, I was like, oh, I have 100 followers. And now every time I get to a new level, I'm like, okay, now this level next. So when I'm at 100,000, I'm going to be like, okay, well, now another 100,000. So at what point do you really just rest on your laurels for a fucking minute? It's good to be ambitious, but like feel contentment at the what is. Yeah.
We talk about ambition, like I'm ambitious, but I'm in this, I'm going to be an artist right now. I'm a contractor, and that brings up a lot about my ambition. But you have to be ambitious, but I'm coming from a place from my heart. As far as I know. Yeah, it's coming from a heart place to chase what we want because it makes me happy. When working with patterning, like I would work with people in their food and exercise patterning, they would be happy when I'm going to
10 more pounds.
That's right.
5 more pounds.
That's right.
10% less body fat.
That's right. That's right. And so what is it? And this is old school. I don't know. I don't work as much with food behaviors anymore because it doesn't stop there. Yeah. That's not it. It's something bigger. But, fitting into a pair of pants, going on vacation, that external validation, right? Versus the internal validation that we find, that self-efficacy, that internal validation. And I think that's something we have to look at always.
And the eating it's always deeper. Like that's just a coping mechanism. Totally. So like you and I were talking about all these people who are taking Ozempic. Yeah. It's like, okay, well now you were emotional eating. Yep. So now you're on a substance that doesn't allow you to do that. Yep. How's your overspending, hypersexuality, drug use going? Yep. Like, and I'm not shaming anybody for choosing to
How are you self-soothing now?
But if that wasn't the root, if that root cause was something else, you're not getting to it. You're just going to create a new coping mechanism and be skinny doing it.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I've been skinny.
It is a nice. Remember when they used to say nothing tastes as good as skinny feels? That's so toxic.
I know.
But I used to love it. I'd be like, yeah, that's right.
That's control.
That's facts.
I'm not eating. It's control.
It does feel good to be skinny.
Yeah, it does. For a minute.
Yeah.
I don't know, but it is.
And then you redefine it and you look back at a picture and you're like, damn, I thought I was fat in that picture. That's so sad.
I know. I brought some pictures I want to show you when we're done here. Yes. When I have that distorted view, but the being happier if and when, and then again, just loving what it does. But the self-soothing, coming back to the self-soothing, right? That's what we're doing. We're self-soothing something. How do we become emotionally literate enough to self-soothe in healthy ways? Or healthy? That sounds judgmental too. I guess, I don't know. How do we self-soothe? Talking about, like, say,
in ways that serve us.
Right. I'm being drawn to think about our kids in the classroom. They can't read. They can't. Their coping is dissociating or whatever it is, numbing out
or anger,
numbing out. Right. So then we have to learn how to self-soothe. So we're in this position of being open. Right? I'm back on polyvagal theory again, but a way that we can be open. And what do I really need right now? Why am I eating this? Why am I exercising so fucking hard to punish myself? What do I actually need here?
It's a powerful tool.
Yeah.
I'm learning to use that right now.
Yeah.
The whole oh, there it is. What is this? What do I really need right now? How can I soothe myself?
Yep.
Because other people, while they may trigger me, they're not responsible for my triggers. I am.
Right.
So how can I soothe myself through this? And I had to get past this idea that healing meant no more triggers. And so when I would get triggered, I'd be like, well, I'm failing at this.
I'm not good at it.
Yeah. And I'm not enough.
I'm not good enough.
At it.
Yeah.
And so I'm not doing it
I'm
right.
not perfect.
And so finally reaching this place of, it literally is just learning to self-soothe. It's all still there. The world is still what the world is.
Yep.
The triggers are still there. That old stuff, is still going to come up. But how are you increasing your muscle of how to self-regulate and self-soothe versus saying, hey, it triggered me when this happened. I need you to fix this for me.
Right. So much in there. The self-soothing piece, I was so triggered. Like some of my biggest stuff has been coming up in the past few weeks. I have a book I wrote in the past 5 days, but they were all words. What I wrote, Jessica, what do you need to hear right now?
Yeah.
What do you need to hear? I'm going to go do some breath work and just calling that stuff in. I think it is an acquired thing. It's a ongoing life learning thing to find these different things, and there are more, right? There's more research, there are more tools being put out there for us to use to self-soothe, because I think we're doing this, we're talking about this because it's important, because there's change going on.
Yes. And I think that, the culture that we're in right now where everything's easy and you can buy something and suddenly that effort is alleviated from your life. I mean, over time, the washing machine, the dishwasher, now where DoorDash brings your food right to you. Like everything is quicker, instant, less effort. Buy this thing and it'll do the work for you. And that is just not the case. And when there's so many good things out there in the wellness world that you can buy, that you can use as tools, they're literally just tools because it's not an instant. A lot of times I find that people don't want to hear that I sit and go and, ask my inner child, like, what do you need? What can I do? How can I soothe you? That sucks. That's not fun.
No,
That's
not fun. And it's not 6 weeks later, I'm a size 4 again. It doesn't work like that. Right.
I think people, that's why SSRIs or Klonopin or benzos or, or, on the flip side, alcohol, weed, all of that is so appealing because it's just let me not freaking feel this for a minute.
Yeah. It is uncomfortable to feel all that shit.
Yeah.
Let's be clear. And I think what you were talking about, that quick stuff, my undergraduate I did a lot of work with health communication and how do we communicate with people to adopt different behaviors. And it's not as easy as writing an ad. It's not 6 weeks later. I would have people criticize me as an entrepreneur when I was really working with food and exercise behaviors. I was like, I'm not going to tell you you're going to lose weight. You might not. I want to be real with you. That doesn't sell.
Yeah.
Let's be clear. That doesn't sell.
Okay.
But I could not be honest because it's so much more than that. It's so much more than that. It's a lifelong thing. We're still talking about this food stuff. I'm 47 years old. I'm still looking at it. It's further away. I have a different relationship with it, but it's still the soup in which we are breathing.
It's still
soup
there.
That we breathe?
I
breathe soup all the time.
Same.
Cool.
You smell it.
Broth. Yes.
Air that we're breathing is still it's smog.
Yes.
Maybe the smog you could think of our conditioning as the smog that we're all simultaneously breathing in.
Yeah.
So those beautiful moments in plant medicine space where it's all the conditioning's gone.
Yes.
And my whole self is here.
Yes.
But then it's back and you're breathing in the smog.
Yes.
It's just what can you take away from that experience?
I think we were talking about, the integration piece of any life-changing experience. Maybe you went to Mexico. Maybe you went to whatever. But then we do have to come back, what is it, After Ecstasy, The Laundry. I think it's Jack Kornfield who wrote that. But we have these big, big openings. I had a big awakening the other day. And I'm like, okay, now that I know this, how do I get out in the world? But I think it is the integration piece, us being in the world, being in a different vibration, a different place, that's where the good stuff grows.
Yeah.
We've fertilized, we've gotten nutrients, and then we have to go share, and grow and go back. And then maybe we go back to these practices to touch in again. But I think it's the being in the world, because we can't just hide.
With a new lens.
Yes.
With a new perspective, with a new sharpened tool.
Yes.
Maybe.
Compassion. Maybe it's softer. Maybe it's a softer, thinking about breath work and, my Do More Club. It's like, sometimes I was like, could you just be softer?
Yeah.
Could it be softer? Could you slow down? That's cool too. You're doing it right.
I had to get rid of this idea that healing meant suffering.
Oh, right.
I mean, even like 2 episodes ago, I was like,
Yeah.
and I just want to feel all the pain at once. I want to have an exorcism of the pain. I want to get it all out. And I went back and watched it, and I was like,
delete. Delete. Yeah. Yeah, the pain and the suffering. I wrote something like the being attached to struggle. It's so interesting. And, I'm in a breathwork cohort. And sometimes we breathe in joy because why does it have to be such a struggle all the time? And that walking on our knees and that kneeling on rice mentality. For me, it means I've worked hard. I've earned
working on myself.
Yes.
Yeah. And this is a culture of the harder you work, the more that you receive, which is also something to unlearn.
Workaholism myth.
Yeah.
I had to figure that out. I was like, oh.
Who came up with that? Henry Ford?
Yeah. That was a hard realization. You mean I don't work harder, I don't get more?
Yeah.
I'm still looking at that.
A lot of people are not ready for that conversation.
Well, it's scary, right? We're
The loss of control.
Exactly. And maybe the loss of our basic needs being met. For me, that's my story. It's like, if we're not working so hard and struggling, then there's no other way. That's all I know.
Yeah. I'm not doing enough. I'm not doing what I'm supposed to be doing.
Right. And then that's the exercise thing, or that's how I'm eating. So it's full circle. It's full circle. For sure.
Oh my gosh, this has been so great.
Yeah.
It's just been like, you see what happens when you surrender and don't have a plan.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, magic happens.
Yeah.
We create that way, for sure. That's how creation happens.
That's art.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you for being here.
Yeah. Thank you, Taylor.
Today, friend.
I appreciate
this is
it.
amazing.
Yeah.
Appreciate you. Bye, everybody. Until next time. I hope that you enjoyed this episode. I would love to hear what your thoughts are in the comments. Be sure and hit like and then subscribe so that you don't miss an episode.